Okay, so picture this. It is August 24th, 1926. We're in New York City, and the entire city has, well, it's effectively just stopped.
Stopped is one word for it. I'd say it's erupted. It's just chaos.
Right, we're talking about a funeral. But this is not a somber, quiet affair. This is mass hysteria. You have, what, an estimated 100,000 people?
At least 100,000 people flooding the streets. That's like the population of a small city just crammed into a few blocks in Manhattan.
And the atmosphere. It wasn't just grief, was it?
Yeah.
It was actually dangerous.
Oh, incredibly dangerous. The police had to bring in over 100 mounted officers. We're talking horses, literally pushing back into the crowd just to keep people from being crushed.
Brushed against the windows of the funeral home, which were being smashed by fans trying to get in.
Trying to get one last look. And the stories from the time are, well, they feel like fiction. Reports of riots.
I saw reports of despondent fans committing suicide.
Yes, the sheer grief was on another level. And inside the funeral home, it was a circus.
The story about the honor guard always gets me. The funeral home, Frankie Campbell's.
That's the one. They allegedly hired actors to pose as a fascist black shirt honor guard,
Claiming they were sent by Mussolini himself.
which was a total fabrication. Mussolini didn't send anyone. It was pure publicity.
And you think about it.
Yeah.
It sounds like the reaction to, I don't know, the Beatles in the 60s. Or maybe Michael Jackson's passing.
Exactly. But this was the silent film era. There was no internet, no 24-hour news cycle to amplify it. This was all just raw, organic hysteria for one man.
Rudolph Valentino.
The Latin lover, the chic, the man who you could argue was the first true male sex symbol of the silver screen.
And that's really what we're going to unpack today. Because his story isn't just a biography of an actor, it's so much more.
It really is. It's about the invention of modern celebrity. And I think more importantly, it's about this huge cultural battle over masculinity that was raging in the 1920s.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to figure out how this Italian gardener, who, spoiler alert, was briefly homeless,
Slept on benches in Central Park.
how that guy became the world's most desired man, and at the very same time, why he was so hated by so many American men.
And the tragic insecurity that I think defined him right up until his last breath.
So let's get into it. Let's go back to the beginning. Before he was Valentino, the icon.
He was just Rodolfo. Rodolfo Pietro Filiberto Raffaello Guglielmi.
Wow. Okay, try saying that 5 times fast.
I practiced. He was born in 1895 in Castellaneta, Italy. And what's interesting right away is that he wasn't, born a star.
Oh, wow.
In fact, he was seen as a bit of a failure in his youth.
Yeah, that surprised me. Like, his attempts to join the military, you think of Valentino as this virile, strong figure, but he failed the physicals, right?
He did. And the reasons were pretty specific. They said his chest was too small.
Too small. The man who became famous for taking his shirt off.
The very same. That and a minor eye defect. So he was rejected from the army. And you have to put that in context. In 1913 Italy, masculinity is all tied up with military service. So being told you're not physically fit enough, that's a huge blow.
So he's a bit of a washout at home. He can't find his place.
Exactly. He gets an agricultural degree, but can't really make it work. So, like so many others, he looks to America.
But this is the detail that I think tells you everything. When we think of immigrants arriving in 1913, we think of Ellis Island, steerage.
The whole huddled masses experience.
Not Valentino. He travels first class.
He does. His mother bought him a second-class ticket, but he found it unsuitable. So he upgraded himself. He wanted to arrive in style.
It's such a fake-it-till-you-make-it mentality from the very start.
It is. And it meant he got to bypass the big inspection at Ellis Island, but he still had to talk to immigration. And he stretched the truth a bit.
Just a bit.
He told them he was an agriculturalist, which was true. But then he gives his middle name as De Marchesi.
Of the Marquises.
Exactly, trying to sound like he was nobility. He understood even then that Americans have a thing for European aristocracy.
The hustle began the second he stepped off the boat.
It really did. He had a decent amount of money, about $4,000, but he just blew through it.
Living the high life.
Totally. Staying in a boarding house, but dining at the best restaurants, buying champagne for everyone, projecting this image.
But obviously the money runs out.
And when it ran out, the crash was brutal. I mean, we are talking about a guy who went from first-class travel to, as you said, sleeping on benches in Central Park.
There's a steep fall.
It was vertical. He got a job as a landscape gardener on Long Island and got fired for crashing the owner's motorcycle.
Of course he did.
He polished brass, he swept floors. There are these accounts of him washing himself with water from fire hydrants because he couldn't afford a 12-cent room for the night.
It's just incredible to think that only a few years later, this same person would be the most famous man on the planet. So how does he get out of the park?
He dances his way out.
Taxi dancing.
Yeah.
Now, can we just explain what that was? Because it's not about driving a cab.
No. Essentially, you were a dance partner for hire. Wealthy women would go to restaurants or clubs, and they'd pay a handsome young man like Valentino to dance with them.
And this is where that term lounge lizard comes from.
Exactly. It wasn't a compliment. It implied you were a man who lived off of women who didn't have a real job. But for Valentino, it was his ticket into high society.
But it also got him into a lot of trouble. Which brings us to the de Salle scandal. This could have ended his story before it even began.
Oh, it's a messy, messy affair. He gets friendly with this Chilean heiress, Blanca de Salle, who's in a very ugly divorce with her powerful husband.
Valentino gets involved.
He testifies on her behalf, provides evidence that her husband was unfaithful. Now just think about the optics here. You have this immigrant lounge lizard testifying against a rich, powerful American businessman.
Retaliation was probably swift.
Immediate. The vice squad raids his apartment and they arrest him. They charge him with being a pimp.
Whoa. That is a serious charge.
It was almost certainly fabricated to discredit him. The DA mocks him in the press, calling him a bogus count and pointing out that he wore corsets and wristwatches.
And there it is. The first attack on his masculinity. The wristwatch.
Which is funny because now it's standard, but back then, real men had pocket watches. Wristwatches were seen as effeminate.
So the charges get dropped, but his name is Mud in New York.
Completely. And then the story gets even crazier. Blanca de Salle actually shoots and kills her ex-husband a year later.
Oh, my God.
So Valentino is terrified. He's going to be dragged into this huge murder trial. So he does what so many people do when they need a fresh start.
He goes west to Hollywood.
To Hollywood.
Okay, so he arrives in Hollywood around 1917. Is he an instant star?
Not even close. And this is really key to understanding the shift he caused. In 1917, Hollywood had a very specific idea of what a hero looked like.
All American, fair-skinned, blue-eyed.
Exactly. Guys like Wallace Reed, athletic, wholesome, smiling. Valentino was dark, graceful, exotic. He didn't look like a hero to them.
So they cast him as the villain.
The heavy, the gangster, the seducer. The legendary director D.W. Griffith actually told him he was too foreign and needed to act less expressively. Basically said, you don't fit.
But someone saw something. A screenwriter named June Mathis.
June Mathis is the hero of this story, one of the most powerful women in Hollywood at the time. She saw him in a small role and just knew. She was casting this huge epic, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
And she wanted him for the lead.
Against everyone's advice, she fought for him. And that film, in 1921, changed absolutely everything.
There's one scene, right? The tango.
The tango. You have to remember, the tango was seen as this dirty, dangerous dance from Argentina. And Valentino performs it with this incredible controlled intensity.
He's seductive, not aggressive.
Exactly. He's leading, but his focus is entirely on his partner. And suddenly, that exotic look wasn't villainous anymore.
It was desirable.
It shifted the entire paradigm. Women didn't want the boy next door anymore. They wanted the dark, mysterious stranger who could dance.
And then came the sheik.
The sheik, later that same year. This is what cemented the legend.
Yeah.
He plays an Arab sheik who, well, he kidnaps an English woman.
The plot is, let's say, very problematic by today's standards.
Oh, deeply problematic. It's basically a romanticized abduction fantasy. But in 1921, women went wild for it. He became the great lover. And this is the key thing. He was arguably the first male star created entirely by the female gaze.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, other male stars were men that women also liked. Douglas Fairbanks was the guy you wanted to be and the guy your wife wanted to date. Valentino was different. He was made for women. He appealed directly to them, and that made him a massive threat to the average American man.
I can see that. Your wife is swooning over this guy in eyeliner and robes who dances the tango.
Right, and you're just some guy in a suit who comes home tired from work. He represented a type of romantic ideal that American men felt they couldn't and didn't want to compete with.
And that leads right into the backlash. Because for every woman who loved him, there was a man who seemed to despise him.
It was a visceral hatred. They called him a dandy, a Vassalino. They made fun of his pomaded hair, his jewelry, everything.
This wasn't just idle chatter either. This was in newspapers.
It was mainstream, and it all came to a head with one particular incident that really, truly broke him. The pink powder puff incident.
Okay, let's unpack this. This was an editorial in the Chicago Tribune in July of 1926, just a month before he died.
Yes. An anonymous writer claimed he saw a vending machine for pink talcum powder in a men's restroom.
Pink powder. For men.
And instead of just thinking it was weird, he decided to blame the entire feminization of American men on one person, Rudolph Valentino.
I have the quote right here, and it's just shocking. It asks, why didn't someone quietly drown Rudolph Guglielmo years ago?
Quietly drown him. It's horrific. The writer calls him a painted pansy and says he's ruining America's sons. It's a direct assault on his very being.
How did Valentino take that? I mean, surely he had thick skin by then.
He didn't. That's the tragic part. He was incredibly sensitive. He carried that newspaper clipping around with him, showed it to people. He was absolutely furious.
And he challenged the writer to a fight, right?
He did. He wrote an open letter challenging the anonymous writer to a boxing match since dueling was illegal. He was desperate to prove he wasn't a powder puff.
The writer never came forward, of course.
Of course not. But to prove his point, Valentino staged a boxing match against a sports writer on the roof of the Ambassador Hotel in New York.
On the roof. It's so dramatic.
And Valentino won. He was actually quite athletic. But the victory felt empty. He told the journalist H.L. Mencken that the whole thing was revolting. He felt trapped by his own image.
And his chaotic personal life really didn't help matters. For being the great lover, his own love life was a total disaster.
A complete disaster. Let's start with wife number one, Jean Acker.
The marriage that lasted, what, 6 hours?
Something like that. They got married, and on their wedding night, she locked him out of the hotel room.
Locked him out.
Yep. The marriage was over before it began. A ridiculous tragedy, as he called it.
But then came Natasha Rambova. She was different.
A very different kind of person. She was an art director, very intellectual, very controlling, and the relationship started with him getting arrested.
For bigamy.
Right. He married her in Mexico before his divorce from Acker was legally final in California. He was jailed, humiliated.
And once they were finally together, she tried to change his image.
She hated the chic. She pushed him into these artistic films like Monsieur Beaucaire, where he's wearing powdered wigs and beauty marks.
Which just fed right into the effeminate narrative.
Absolutely. The male audience hated it. She became so influential and so difficult that the studios eventually banned her from his movie sets. It was in his contract.
Wow. But he wasn't just a puppet, was he? He fought back against the studios himself.
He did. People forget this, but he went on a one-man strike. He refused to make what he called factory films. He wanted quality.
So the biggest star in the world just stops making movies.
He stops filming. But to make money, he goes on a national dance tour sponsored by a beauty clay company.
Mineralava.
The Mineralava Tour. Can you imagine a top star today doing that, judging beauty contests for a face mask company?
It sounds bizarre.
But it worked. It proved that he was the draw, not the studio. He got a better contract. So by 1926, he's back on top with the son of the sheik. And then it all ends.
August 15th, 1926. He collapses at his hotel in New York.
A perforated ulcer and appendicitis. It led to peritonitis, a massive infection. In the pre-antibiotic era, that was a death sentence.
He has surgery. And this is the detail that just gets me. When he wakes up from the anesthesia, what's the first thing he asks?
He looks at the doctor and asks, "Doctor, am I a pink puff?"
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. He was still thinking about that editorial.
Even on his deathbed, his masculinity was his deepest wound. The doctor, to his credit, told him he'd been very brave, but the infection was just too severe.
He died on August 23rd at only 31 years old.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The funeral, the chaos.
And the circus inside the funeral home. Pola Negri, his supposed fiancée.
Oh, Pola. She put on a performance, fainting over the coffin multiple times, sending a massive floral arrangement that spelled out her own name.
It all felt very Hollywood.
It was. And then the sad, simple fact that Valentino himself had nowhere to be buried. He was broke.
So where did he end up?
June Mathis, the screenwriter who discovered him, stepped in. She had an empty crypt she'd bought for her husband, who she'd since divorced. She let them place Valentino there temporarily.
Temporarily.
But then Mathis herself died the next year and was buried in the crypt next to him. And they're still there, side by side. The woman who made his career is sheltering him in death.
And his grave became a shrine. The woman in black.
The woman in black. The legend of a mysterious veiled woman who brought a red rose to his grave every year.
Was that real?
Well, it started as a PR stunt, but like so many things with Valentino, the myth became real. Other women took up the tradition, and it continues to this day.
So after all of this,
Mhm.
why do we still talk about him? What's the final takeaway?
I think it's that he completely changed what a leading man could be. He proved that softness, that romance, that uh, vulnerability could be a strength on screen. He paved the way for every heartthrob that came after him.
He made it okay to be the romantic lead, not just the action hero.
Exactly. But he paid an incredible price for it. He was a man who wanted to be a farmer, but he was trapped in the image of the great lover.
Charlie Chaplin had a great quote about him. He said, "No man had greater attraction for women than Valentino. No man was more deceived by them."
That's perfect. And the final irony is the pink powder puff incident. The very thing that made him a star, his unique, expressive masculinity, was the very thing he was attacked for. He died trying to prove he was a man, never realizing that just by being himself, he'd already redefined the term.
A powerful thought to end on. He was a pioneer, whether he knew it or not.
A true original.
Well, that's our deep dive on the life and legend of Rudolph Valentino. Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one.